subscribe, and like Universal Karma for more original stories. Now, let's begin this one. Dust swirled in the late summer air as Theodore Theo Blackwell sanded the edges of what would become a handcrafted jewelry box. His workshop, a converted garage behind his modest two-bedroom home, had become his sanctuary over the past year. The rhythmic sound of sandpaper against wood helped silence the echoes of conversations that still haunted him. "You married beneath yourself, Natalie." Douglas Lambert's voice would replay in Theo's mind. "A construction worker with big dreams isn't the provider someone of your caliber deserves." Theo had overheard his father-in-law's statement at their wedding reception 3 years ago. He wasn't supposed to hear it, a private conversation between Douglas and his wife, Beverly, in what they thought was an empty hallway. But Theo had been there, stepping away to collect himself before rejoining the celebration. He never told Natalie what he'd heard. What good would it do? The Lamberts had already made their feelings clear in countless subtle ways. The surprise inspections of their little starter home, the job offers to friends that Douglas would happen to mention whenever Theo discussed his construction work, the gifts of financial self-help books each Christmas. Theo placed the sandpaper down and examined his work. The mahogany gleamed in the workshop lights, its grain a testament to the 1,000-year journey of the tree it once was. He ran his fingers over the smooth surface, tracing the inlaid pattern he designed specifically for Natalie, stars arranged in the constellation that had shone above them on their first date. His phone vibrated against the workbench. A text from Miles Donovan, his former boss and mentor. "It's done. The transfer went through this morning. Keys are at my office whenever you're ready." Theo stared at the message for a long moment, his heart racing. 6 months of secret 12-hour days, weekend work, and hidden bank accounts had culminated in this moment. The Lambert estate, the sprawling colonial home that had been foreclosed 3 months ago when Douglas's risky investments finally caught up with him, now belonged to Theo. The Lamberts didn't know. They told everyone they were downsizing by choice to the rental they now occupied. Only Theo, with his connections in the construction industry, had learned the truth that Douglas had lost almost everything, including the family home that had been in Beverly's family for generations. The doorbell rang, pulling Theo from his thoughts. He wiped sawdust from his hands and made his way through the house. Natalie would be home from her hospital shift in an hour, and they had Thanksgiving dinner at her parents' rental home tonight. The dinner he'd been planning for since learning about the foreclosure. Theo opened the door to find Miles standing there, a small envelope in his weathered hands. "Thought I'd save you the trip," Miles said, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "Plus, I want to see your face when I handed these over." Miles pressed the envelope into Theo's palm. "You sure about this, kid? It's one hell of a statement." Theo nodded, opening the envelope to look at the keys inside. "They've spent 3 years making me feel like I'm not good enough. Tonight, they learn exactly who I am." After Miles left, Theo slipped the envelope into the mahogany box, which he wrapped in simple brown paper, a deliberate choice that would appear cheap and thoughtless to the status-conscious Lamberts. The perfect Trojan horse for what lay inside. When Natalie arrived home, her hospital scrubs wrinkled from a long shift in the pediatric ward, she found Theo dressed and ready, the unassuming package sitting on their coffee table. "What's that?" she asked, kissing him on the cheek. "Just a little something for your parents," Theo replied, his tone casual. "For hosting Thanksgiving." Natalie's smile faltered slightly. "You didn't have to do that. You know they're—" She trailed off. "Difficult to impress?" Theo finished for her. "Don't worry. This isn't about impressing them." 3 hours later, they pulled into the driveway of the modest rental the Lamberts now called home. Through the windows, Theo could see the silhouettes of Natalie's siblings, her brother Philip and his wife Renee, her sister Valerie. The gang was all there. "Ready?" Natalie asked, squeezing his hand. Theo looked at the simply wrapped package in his lap and nodded. "More than you know." The Lamberts' rental home was meticulously decorated to maintain appearances, with borrowed furniture arranged to mimic their former grandeur. Beverly Lambert greeted them at the door, her smile tight as she hugged Natalie and offered Theo the same perfunctory cheek kiss she always did. "We're all in the living room," she announced, leading them through the foyer. Douglas just opened a bottle of Bordeaux he's been saving. The living room buzzed with conversation that quieted as they entered. Douglas stood by the fireplace, wine glass in hand, his expensive watch catching the light as he gestured while telling some story. He paused when he saw Theo. "The working man arrives," Douglas said with what he probably thought was good-natured ribbing. Just in time to hear about Philip's promotion. Philip, Natalie's older brother who worked at Douglas's investment firm, raised his glass with a smirk. Beside him, his wife Renee examined her manicure with practiced boredom. "Congratulations," Theo said, his voice genuine. He'd never had an issue with Philip personally. The man was simply a product of his environment. Natalie's sister Valerie sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. At 32, she was still living off her parents' diminishing generosity, a fact that had somehow never garnered the criticism that Theo's honest work did. "We brought something," Natalie said, nodding to the package in Theo's hands. "Oh, how thoughtful," Beverly said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "You can put it with the others." She gestured to a small side table where a few elegantly wrapped packages sat. Next to Theo's brown paper package, they would look even more sophisticated. The evening progressed predictably. Douglas dominated conversation with stories about clients and market insights that were clearly intended to remind everyone of his importance. Beverly fretted over the catered meal, pretending she prepared it herself. Philip and Renee discussed their upcoming vacation to Bali. Valerie occasionally looked up from her phone to make a cutting remark. And through it all, Theo watched. He noticed how Douglas's stories carefully avoided any mention of his recent financial troubles. He saw the worry lines around Beverly's eyes when she thought no one was looking. He observed the way Philip kept refilling his wine glass, his promotion perhaps not as secure as he'd suggested. After dinner, as they gathered again in the living room, Beverly clapped her hands. "Shall we open the host gifts?" It was a Lambert tradition, bringing small tokens of appreciation for holiday hosts. Once in their old home, these gifts had been placed on the grand piano in the sitting room. Now they sat on a rental end table, a small but telling difference. Beverly opened Philip and Renee's gift first, an expensive bottle of champagne. "How lovely," she cooed, placing on the bar cart. Valerie had brought an artisanal cheese board, which received similar praise. Then Beverly picked up Theo and Natalie's package, her perfectly manicured fingers hesitating at the simple brown wrapping. "And what do we have here?" Theo felt Natalie tense beside him. He placed a reassuring hand on her knee. Beverly unwrapped the package with deliberate slowness, revealing the handcrafted mahogany box. Despite himself, Theo felt a surge of pride at the craftsmanship. "Oh," Beverly said, her voice flat. "It's a box." "Open it, Mom," Natalie encouraged. Beverly lifted the lid, revealing the envelope inside. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows furrowed in confusion as she removed it and opened it to find the keys. "What's this supposed to be?" Douglas asked, leaning forward. "Keys to a new tool shed." He chuckled at his own joke, and Philip joined in. Theo felt a calm settle over him. The moment he'd been preparing for had arrived. "Actually," he said, his voice steady, "those are the keys to 42, Oak Ridge Lane." The room went silent. Douglas's face drained of color. "That's our old address," Beverly said, confusion evident in her voice. "Yes," Theo confirmed. "I bought it." Douglas stood abruptly, wine sloshing over the rim of his glass. "That's impossible. The bank foreclosed on it," Theo finished for him. "I know. I have friends in real estate who let me know when it hit the market. I've spent the last 6 months taking on extra projects, working nights and weekends to save enough for the down payment. The rest I financed through Miles Donovan. The transfer completed this morning." The silence in the room was deafening. Natalie stared at Theo, shock written across her features. She hadn't known either. "Why would you do that?" Beverly whispered, her fingers clutching the keys so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Theo looked directly at Douglas. "Because 3 years ago, at my wedding reception, I overheard you tell Beverly that I wasn't good enough for your daughter. That a construction worker with big dreams couldn't provide what Natalie deserved." Douglas's face registered shock then embarrassment, then anger. So, I wanted to show you exactly what a construction worker with dreams can provide, Theo continued. Those keys aren't toy keys like you assumed. They unlock the dream house I've just purchased, the one you lost because of bad investments. The room seemed to freeze. Philip set his wine glass down heavily. Renee's mouth opened in a perfect O of surprise. Valerie finally put her phone down, fully engaged for the first time that evening. You had no right, Douglas began, his voice trembling with rage. I had every right, Theo countered calmly. It was a fair market transaction. But here's the thing, I'm not keeping it. He turned to Beverly, whose eyes had filled with tears. That house has been your family for generations. It holds memories that can't be replaced. So those keys? They're yours. The house is yours. The silence that followed Theo's revelation was interrupted only by Beverly's strangled sob. Douglas remained frozen, his complexion ashen, wine glass still clutched in his trembling hand. What do you mean it's ours? He finally managed, his voice a hoarse whisper. Theo maintained his composure, though his heart hammered in his chest. I'm signing it over to you. Free and clear. That's not possible, Douglas said, setting down his glass and straightening his posture in an attempt to regain control. You can't afford to do that. That's the thing you never bothered to learn about me, Douglas, Theo said, his tone devoid of malice. I've been working with Miles Donovan for 10 years. 2 years ago, he made me partner in his construction company. Last year, I bought him out when he decided to retire. Natalie turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise. You own Donovan Construction now? Why didn't you tell me? Theo took her hand. I wanted to prove myself first, to build something solid before I shared it with you. I was going to tell you tonight, after dinner. So you've been what? Playing poor? Letting us think you were struggling? Douglas demanded, anger beginning to replace his shock. No, Theo replied firmly. I've been living within my means. Saving. Investing carefully. Building a sustainable business. The opposite of flaunting wealth you don't actually have. The barb landed precisely where Theo intended. Douglas flinched visibly. Beverly still clutched the keys, her hands shaking. I don't understand. Why would you do this for us? After how we've treated you? Theo softened his expression as he looked at his mother-in-law. Because that house isn't just your history. It's Natalie's too. And potentially our children's someday. I didn't do this for you. I did it for the future of our family. Philip cleared his throat, setting his wine glass down. Does this mean my position at the firm is safe? Theo finished for him. That depends on how you perform, I imagine. I have no intention of interfering with Douglas's business. This isn't a takeover. Renee clutched Philip's arm, her perfectly composed facade cracking slightly. Valerie finally spoke up. So you're like rich now? She asked bluntly. I'm comfortable, Theo corrected. And I've built something sustainable. Something that can't be lost with a few bad bets. Douglas's face flushed at the thinly veiled reference to his financial missteps. There are conditions to this gift, Theo continued. First, the house remains in a trust I've established, ensuring it stays in the family. Second, it's time for honesty. No more pretending. Your financial troubles aren't a secret anymore. How dare you? Douglas began. Dad, stop, Natalie interrupted, finding her voice at last. She turned to Theo. I still don't understand why you kept all this from me. Theo's expression softened as he looked at his wife. I wanted to build something worthy of you without Douglas's connections or influence. Something that was mine, ours alone. I should have told you sooner, and I'm sorry for that. This is a lot to process, Natalie said quietly. I know, Theo acknowledged. And we have a lot to talk about when we get home. Beverly suddenly stood, still clutching the keys. I need to see it, she said abruptly. The house. I need to know it's real. Douglas started to protest, but Beverly silenced him with a look. Enough, Douglas. The charade is over. She turned to Theo. Will you take me? Now. Within 20 minutes, they were standing in front of the colonial home that had been in Beverly's family for generations. The golden light from the street lamps cast a warm glow on the red brick facade. Beverly approached slowly, as if in a dream, and fitted the key into the lock. When the door swung open, she let out a small gasp. The entryway was exactly as they had left it, down to the antique console table that had been too heavy to move in their hasty departure. "How was this possible?" she whispered. "The foreclosure. Everything was supposed to be auctioned." "I bought the contents separately," Theo explained. "Most of it was still in storage. I had it all brought back and arranged as closely as possible to how it was before." Beverly turned to him, tears streaming freely down her face now. "Why?" "Because some things shouldn't be lost," Theo said simply. "Some legacies deserve to continue." Douglas stood in the doorway, his usual commanding presence diminished. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "You don't have to say anything," Theo replied. "But things will be different going forward. I'm not the son-in-law you wanted, but I'm the one Natalie chose. And I think I've proven I can provide for her." Douglas nodded slowly, a gesture of concession that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. Later that night, as Theo and Natalie drove home to their modest house, she finally broke their comfortable silence. "Were you ever going to tell me about Donovan Construction?" "Yes," Theo said without hesitation. "After tonight, I wanted to build something solid first, something that couldn't be dismissed as luck or a fluke. Because of what my father said at our wedding, Natalie realized." Theo nodded. "I never wanted you to have to choose between your family and me. I wanted to earn their respect on my own terms." Natalie reached across the console to take his hand. "You know, I never cared about any of that. About money or status." "I know," Theo said, squeezing her hand. "That's why I love you. But I cared about building something meaningful, something that would last." As they pulled into their driveway, Natalie looked at their modest home with new eyes. "So what happens now? Do we move into something bigger?" Theo turned off the engine and turned to face her. "That's up to us. This was never about impressing your family or anyone else. It was about creating security, building a foundation for our future." He paused. "For our family." Natalie's eyes widened. "You know," Theo smiled. The pregnancy test in the bathroom trash wasn't very well hidden. Tears welled in Natalie's eyes as she leaned across to kiss him. "I was going to tell you tonight. Looks like we both had surprises planned," Theo said, pulling her closer. As they sat in their car, in front of their modest home, Theo realized that the true legacy he was building had nothing to do with houses or businesses. It was about family, the one he'd married into despite their flaws, and the one he and Natalie were now beginning. The keys he'd given Beverly weren't just to a house. They were to a future where old wounds could heal and new beginnings were possible. A future built not on appearances or status, but on honesty, hard work, and forgiveness. That was a legacy worth building.